Okay, I'll call this meeting of the City of Kerrville Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Sabina, will you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Bob Waller,
Here.
Garrett Harmon, Don Barnett,
Here.
Michael Siegerman,
Here.
Rustin Zuber,
Here.
David Jones,
Here.
Marty Leonard.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have a quorum. First on the agenda, Visitor Citizens Forum. Oops. Make sure my microphone's on. Visitors and Citizens Forum. Any person with business not scheduled on the agenda is encouraged to briefly speak to the commission. Please fill out the speaker request form. Give it to the commission secretary prior to the meeting. The number of speakers will be limited to the first 10, and each speaker limited to 3 minutes. No formal action can be taken on these items, as the Open Meetings Act requires formal action items to be posted on the agenda no later than 72 hours before the meetings. If formal action is required, the items will be placed on an agenda for a future meeting. Number 2, consent agenda. All items listed below on the consent agenda are considered routine or ministerial in nature and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item or items will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Let the record show that Garrett Harmon, Vice Chair, joined the meeting at 4:32. 2A is approval of the minutes from the November 16, 2017 meeting on page 2. Please let us know if you see any changes that need to be made. If not, I'll accept the motion.
I have questions. I guess my biggest concern about the wording on section 6-36 under exempt signs, where it says item 2, mounted or secured within a durable frame constructed.
Chair, we're talking about the minutes from
I'm sorry.
Approving the minutes now, so
I'm sorry.
you're not that late.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, on the minutes? Okay. I move that they're approved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. I wasn't here.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor to
slippery slope
accept the
here.
minutes as presented, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0. And moving on
To the concern.
to the concern. That's right. Number 3, for a discussion item. 3A, discussion, provide input for city council consideration of sign ordinance text amendment, file number 2017-081. Sabina?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to remind you of how we got here, just real briefly. And this item is before you. There is no legal requirement for a recommendation from this body, but the City Council did ask us to come back to you because of the history of this one, and also, I believe, because this body has authority over sign variances. So it really makes sense for you to weigh in on this proposed amendment. So in October, if you'll recall, we did bring a sign variance before you, and I'll show you some pictures in a second here. And you did approve the variance for the pole banners. Then in November, we went to the City Council and had very quickly kind of thrown together a sign amendment. The council did table or deferred action on that item so that we could come back and do a little more thorough job on the text amendment. And that is why we are before you this evening. So if you'll recall, it was Peterson Hospital that requested the pole banner variance, that the banner signs that they had put up and through code enforcement action had to take back down were 2 feet by 6 feet. And there were several of them, and this is just a picture of one of them. But the site itself, even though there were 14 signs, the site itself is 35 acres, so it's quite a large site, and the banners really, even though there were a number of them on a per acre basis, really not a large visual impact there. And normally in the past, I believe in the months before, maybe a couple of years before, the kind of the meat and potatoes was what was presented to you as far as any text amendments to the zoning code, the zoning ordinance. But this evening we actually were changing that up a little bit and bringing the actual draft of the ordinance that's going to go to the city council before you. But this is just a summary of what it does. Basically, it defines those pole banners. And to me, really, the key is that they're firmly, securely mounted to a pole that would keep them from very quickly and easily becoming frayed or tattered or torn. That they are within a frame, and that they be of durable materials. That they are not larger than that 12 square feet, which tends to be, from what I understand, a pretty typical size for these kinds of banners. Maximum of 5 for every 2 acres, which is the math that works out for the 14 on the 35 acres. Just visually tends to not be too much of a visual distraction. And then there are some maintenance provisions in the ordinance that's before you as well. And that's all I have on it.
Okay, thank you.
I got a question. If somebody has less than 2 acres, some small lot, how do they figure how many banners they can put up?
Well, the math basically would work out so that they could not have, unless they have that 2 acre. So basically,
Oh, if you're less than 2 acres, you cannot have any banners. Is that right?
right. I think the intention is, in order to get to the visual, and really we just used Peterson as a guide there.
No, but I think his question is, if you have a small building, it's like an acre site, would they be allowed to have one banner?
Not the way that it's worded right now.
'Cause
Not unless
if you did this by math, you could say 5 per 2 acres. I mean, that's 1.5. That's 2.5 per acre. But it's not really what that says. There's a minimum number of acre.
Right.
Somewhere
it was in
here.
order to round to make it a number and not have half signs.
I might suggest that you would put that in this ordinance, that a minimum size for being able to have these is 2 acres. Anything less than 2 acres, you're not allowed.
To clarify,
I think.
Or you're
if that's your
allowed,
intention.
or you're allowed 1 if you have 2 acres.
Well,
You
it
know, up
says
to
who
2
you-
acres, you're allowed 1.
Less than 2 acres, yeah.
Well, this says
No,
5
this
per
says
2
what
acres.
she's saying is, if you have.
If I have
less
2
than
acres, I can
less
have
than
5
2 acres,
signs.
You can't have any. And I think it just needs to be clarified that.
Yeah, if you think, I'm thinking of a particular building over here on Clay Street, right behind us over here. There's several buildings in there that are all rented buildings, but together, collectively, that's probably 2 acres. But there's poles along there, so they could actually put 5 poles. I mean, they could have 5
If
banners
it's 2 acres, yes.
within the 2 acre deal. And
The
but
way
there
that
would
it's
be
written, yeah.
there would be separate businesses in there that would be doing that. But even with it, but the landlord is the 2 acre owner. I mean, I'm not trying to figure ways around the ordinance, but I'm figuring ways they could comply with the ordinance. And
Well,
unless your business is a 2 acre business, like Walmart is more than a 2 acre business. No question, they could do it. They could meet this requirement, and they should be allowed to meet this requirement. Because the intent here aesthetically is to be not to be overwhelming or to be dominating in a small area. I think that's the intent.
In other words, if you own one Shriner building, or some building that has 25 tenants, and the building lot size is, let's say it's 4 acres, you're allowed 10 10 banners, correct? And I mean, any one of the businesses can use them.
Right.
Okay.
Right. We're really trying to stay away from assigning who has them and
Well, yeah,
what the
I-
language is
well,
going
you
to be
can't
on
do
there.
that. As long as it meets the design, the size, and the structure. But I do think, again, if you're gonna make it under 2 acres, you're not allowed to have any pole signs, and that needs to be probably maximum of 5 per 2 acres. Under 2 acres, no signs allowed, no pole signs allowed, something like that. Because, I mean, if I've got a 1 acre lot with a little building on it, and I'm looking at, it says you can have 5 for 2 acres, that means I can have 2.5. So I would clarify that.
Do we want to say, I mean,
Do we want to
allow
limit
one?
that though? Or do we want to say, is it okay to have one banner sign if you have less than 2 acres?
Less than
It's
2 acres.
certainly up for discussion and, right.
Mike,
I
what
would
are
think
your
so.
thoughts?
Yeah, Mike?
Well, I think this is great, and why staff suggested we take this to y'all, because y'all are, have chewed on it and are chewing on it and have good comments. In talking to Sabina earlier, I pointed out five per 2 acres. In some ways it's easy, but in some way, then can you apply a percentage of that or proportion of that? So what I'm hearing from y'all is, and what I maybe recommend is, you all decide how many per acre in the smallest quantity. So 1 per 1 acre, 1 per half acre, and then you go up from there so that they can then apply it. So if you come in with 6.5 acres, they know what to do. Because I mean, they're not going to get a lot of 5 acres. Tracks that come in and go, or
No,
2 acre tracks can be easy to apply. So I think y'all have hit on something that's really good. Start low, so that then they can have kind of an equation they can start applying. One thing I thought of too is, as we're sitting here, which is great for why y'all have this discussion, I don't know if y'all want more than one banner on per pole. So in other words, I don't know if they get to stick 100-foot pole up in the middle of their development and then put 7 or 8 banners on that. So that's just something else to think about.
That's a good point.
Well, but I would say, and I think that needs to be defined, but I would guess if you're allowed to have 5 banners per 2 acres, can you put all 5 of them on one pole? Because if you put 2 banners on one pole for the 5 acres, you've only got 3 banners left. It's
Yeah.
not the poles, it's the banners, I would assume, but that's a good point.
The way it's written right now.
This was written to just meet Peterson's allowance, is that correct?
Yes,
This is not a copycat of what Fredericksburg does or anybody else does. So whatever, we don't really know what they're doing, what their limits are, and what they do about banners.
Because of the discussion that we had during the variance process with you, it seemed to be that what was being proposed was amenable to.
It was reasonable, right.
Mhm.
And that's why that was used, and really the language that I sent to Mike was the most simple that we could
Sure.
put in here. But you're right, the way that it's worded right now, it doesn't get to, if somebody wanted to do something like that, right now, it's not assigned where. In other words, if you have a 35-acre site and you wanted to put all 14 banners on one pole, you could do that the way it's written right now.
Well, yeah, my thought is we need to, I like to limit it 1 banner per pole. And even, 5 per 2 acres. Maybe not, and
Maybe it should be 4 per 2 acres.
yeah, I think 5
That
may
way-
be kind
That way
of,
you can do the math easier.
maybe
To your
kinda
point,
high.
Right.
I don't think 5 per acre, go down to 4 per 2 acres. But I do think it should be a minimum number of acres. per business, not per facility, because as I said, over here on Clay Street, the owner that owns a lot of that property there, and that's more than 2 acres there. But there's only 2 or 3 poles, and you could, some of the other businesses inside that she rents to could put a banner up on Clay Street. Could be done under this kind of scheme. If we want to allow that, I don't know that we do. The reason we went with the Peterson is because it's their own parking lot, it's their own environment. It's not really in the public way, in the public environment. Peterson's not, in my opinion.
So if you have less than 2 acres, we need to maybe come up with a number of poles and 1 banner per pole.
I think 1 or 2, and I think 1 would be an acceptable number. You're allowed 1 pole
Less than
banner
2 acres.
for up to 2 acres.
Well, this math right here, I mean, if you strictly apply, you can put five poles per 2 acres. I mean, Peterson can put 85 poles up. They got 35 acres. You divide that by two, that's 17, right? And you can, so this really, whatever you do, it's not gonna affect Peterson. I mean, if you change it to 4. You see what I'm saying? They have 35 acres, so 35 acres divided by 2 acres is 17. And you can put 5 per 2 acres. That gives them the right to put up 85 pole banners.
It seems we ought to use them as the maximum for right now.
Yeah, maybe there should be a limit on the number of banners.
Well,
That's what you're raising up now.
That's what I'm saying.
By
I
the
mean,
Well, per pole, yeah, I think 1
Well-
banner per pole.
I know I'm junior varsity, but if I can step in here. for
Punt,
just a
go ahead
sec.
and punt.
Thank you.
step up to the dais.
No, thank you. It's a 12-foot, it's a banner. We have a sign ordinance. Nobody, and you know how much it costs to put up a pole. Nobody's gonna put up a pole to put a banner on it.
I agree.
This is an addition to,
I agree.
okay? And so nobody's gonna be able to put banners together to make some big picture, i.e. a sign. And so this is merely an add-on. So you're cut out of any sort of big impact when you have a 12 square foot minimum.
Well,
That's 2 foot by 6 feet.
the caveat to that is if you take Walmart, you know, if you take River Hill Mall, they can put up a whole bunch of poles with banners.
Well, they can
No,
use
well,
lights,
wait a
they
minute,
can
what
use
kind of-
existing light standards.
Yeah.
These go, yeah, the concept is they go on a light standard.
Yeah.
You don't put up
Oh,
poles.
no, you're correct.
Yeah, so you're not gonna be putting up poles to put up a banner.
It's
But there's
really, I don't
nothing
think-
in this
It's really not about
language
the
that
poles,
prohibits
it's
you
about
from
the
doing that.
banners.
Sir?
But there's nothing in this language that prohibits you from
Except
doing
the
that.
cost.
It's not
Yeah.
about the poles, it's
Yeah.
about the banners.
Yeah, right,
You
okay.
can put no one's gonna put up a pole if they can't put a banner on it. If you got the light standards up, I mean, I would assume that would be considered a pole, Mike, is that,
I lost the last part of that.
If-
What would be considered a pole?
if,
Light, a
let's take
Oh, yeah.
Walmart, they've got all those,
Yeah.
okay, they could use, that would be considered a pole, they can put
Sure.
banners on it. So
Yeah.
it's really not a pole ordinance, it's a banner ordinance.
Exactly, exactly. And
Well,
you're
the whole reason we approved, or one of the main reasons we approved Peterson Health was because they weren't promoting the business.
That
right.
too.
And that's my concern, that is making these available for retail wholesale promotion as opposed to what we approved that exception for.
Well, what is the additional language in here about usage of the banner? Is it just for,
There's nothing in here about that.
Well, personally, I don't have an issue with that. I think if this is my personal thoughts on it. If you have a business big enough to have a couple of light poles in your parking lot, you should be allowed to use those poles for advertising. Granted, we're limiting the size, we're limiting
The
the
number.
material,
And we're limiting the number.
and we're limiting the number.
Yeah.
Are we gonna step in there and limit what you say on
No,
it?
I don't think
Well,
so.
we already
Yeah.
have limitations on existing signs that they can put up for promotion.
Mm-hmm. And
So this, we can't give them something that lets them go beyond that.
Well, if I remember correctly, when Peterson Regional came in, when Murray came in front of us, we were looking at something that was about promoting the welfare of the community. It wasn't about advertising. I think that's what the banner variance basically was based on the fact that they were putting these banners up which promoted, you know, good feelings and welfare in the community. Is that correct? Am I wrong, or is that what we talked about?
That
No,
was-
we had actually talked about limiting this language to places like the hospital
In the school?
or schools,
Right.
I think.
Right.
Not to spread it across the community and make it available to any business. Because it didn't promote retail or wholesale.
Right.
Uh,
I mean, I think if we go back and look at that, that's exactly what they came in front of us for, because they were messages that were uplifting and promoting the well-being of the community, not advertising the hospital. They weren't advertising the hospital on their banners.
Right, and that's a great point. The issue that we have as a city is when we get into when we get into reading the sign in terms of what, and then what to apply, that's where we get into trouble. That's the first thing. So my other comment is, you're right, they had, you know, kind of community wellness, if you will.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't come get an MRI. It was,
Right.
So you can see like even a Walmart doing the same thing. Hey, you know, good feelings, because if I'm driving down the road and I have these good feelings, well, maybe I'll go into that store.
Right.
So that's the quandary we kind of get involved in.
Isn't another option just give them the variance and then don't do anything else?
That's what I was thinking, exactly.
Well, and yes, but the issue there that you have is we're probably going to have other people kind of at the gate, if you will. And my feeling is, I'm not the planner, I'm not in their department, but if you have more than one kind of ready to do something, that you probably ought to take a look at the code.
Right.
And do something. To me, signs are, if you have a business, you know, like particularly like a chain, all of a sudden you're going to show up one day, there's going to be boxes of these signs ready to go, because the corporate folks will just send them to you, and then all of a sudden you'll be down at the city saying, hey, can we put up a pole banner? Because our corporate guys said we can. And we deal with that a lot. And then we have to go back out, no, you can't do banners in certain situations.
Well, I think what you were saying is really, the reality is, I mean, there's a lot of little businesses that want to put up a banner, but they're not going to spend the money it takes to put up a pole.
Right.
Do we have a problem, Mike, in limiting these pole banners to specific entities?
Yes, and that's another point. You know, I think you would be hard pressed to come up with some sort of reasonable, not that you're not doing reasonable arguments now, but something that is valid and a reasonable argument to say, well, hospital can do it, but another entity can't, even if it's the other entity is a for-profit. In my mind, you have a problem there. And you're right, you've touched on it. The market's going to dictate some of this, because some people aren't going to want to pay for the banners. Sabina's done the research, and these banners are pretty expensive.
Well, they have
One.
to understand that banner's supposed to look like the ones that Peterson's using, not like a flag banner.
Right, and I think she's done a good job of, you know, materials to withstand weather, and, you know, that.
But I mean, I think it almost has to show a picture of what that banner attached completely at the bottom, completely at the top.
Yeah, we can do that. We can add.
Well, if you leave it at 12 square feet, it could be, you know,
4 by 3.
it could be 4 by 3 or kind of 2 by 6. That's really about it. And I mean, if we're okay with a 4 by 3 banner.
Well, and the only, not to interrupt, but the other thing that came to mind is the discussion y'all have had on poles. I'm not, and that's not defined. I'm not sure it wouldn't be wise to kind of define a pole. So in other words, they can't just go stick 10 rebar in the ground
Exactly.
and then
I
hoist
agree
these
with you.
banners. Because I don't think that's y'all's intent either.
I think
I think that's a very important part.
one of the questions I've got is, it says private pole or post, and post is open to interpretation,
sir.
I would think.
Yeah.
So I think if you say private pole, and then come down here, and it says, constructed of metal or similar material, I guess you could put what, a base size or something in there? I'm not sure about that.
I actually think you could strike out post, because that is a totally different connotation than pole. A post could be wood,
Right,
basically.
no, you're exactly right.
But I think a pole, pretty much, I think could be the only thing you can put a banner on. I think that could be defined that way. I
You could
also
say
think
metal pole, 'cause, you know.
Add the word metal.
Yeah, add that, because I
a
mean,
metal pole or a
anything
metal
tall enough
post.
needs to be, it's gotta be metal, or get rid of post, just
I
say
think
metal
get rid of
pole.
Yeah,
post. I
it's
think
a-
it should be a
plus-
metal pole.
But down below it does say metal.
Metal pole,
It says metal or similar material.
So fiberglass could be similar?
Well,
No, it doesn't.
looking back,
You're
it's talking about the frame.
Talked about the
for the
frame, it doesn't say
banner.
Yeah.
anything about the
The
pole.
pole needs to be,
Say manufactured.
Yeah, and that brings up another point. I really think you need to define it as a metal pole with maximum diameter. I mean, a metal pole could be, and again, you're right about no one's gonna spend the money but, technically speaking, I could put a metal pole up there that was 4 feet in diameter.
Mm-hmm.
For
For a 12 square foot banner? I don't think so.
It's all about money.
can you say it meets the standards of light standard or something?
I mean, you can give a minimum and maximum pole diameter and a minimum and maximum height.
Yeah.
I think height's
Um,
important.
I think the anchorage of that is important, not that it needs to be designed by a structural engineer, but it needs to be anchored. And I don't know that it necessarily needs to be anchored in concrete. You could say that just to make sure it gets stiff, but you don't have to have it anchored in concrete to have a secure pole. So I don't.
Yeah, in the sign ordinance, the city has a sign ordinance, and I'm sure it covers pole signs. Does it define?
It does not. It does not.
It doesn't define what
We
a
have-
pole has
we
to be
have-
made of, or how strong it has to be, or how it has to be anchored in the ground?
That really comes back on the building code side.
Okay,
So if it's of certain height, size, requires certain size footings, maybe
well,
engineering.
then that's fine. That's just, you just need to have something that someone has to.
I guess anchored securely, maybe that's as broad as we can be without getting a structural engineer involved.
Right.
I know when you put a flagpole up in the city, it has to meet certain wind restrictions and so forth.
I mean, I don't have an issue with making this limited to, 1 pole per acre. So you have 5 acres, you can do 5 poles. If you have 4 acres, you can do 4 poles. If you have 3 acres, you can do 3 poles.
Not to exceed 1 pole per acre.
1 pole per acre, yeah.
it's the most simple.
And that way, like Don was saying, then you can define, you don't have to do any math
No,
or anything.
right.
And that's fine for, fine for Peterson. I mean, they got 14 signs and
Right.
they have 35 acres, so.
So is that 0 banners from 0 to 1 acre, or is it 1 for that?
Maybe less than 2. That's what we talked about.
I think
So
that
if we do
you
one,
can-
if we do 1 per acre, does it mean you can have 1 if you have half an acre, or,
That's up to y'all.
yeah?
I mean, you
That's
could
pretty
round it
simple.
up.
Allow it 0 to 1 acres, it's 1
Yeah,
pole.
and I don't have a problem with someone that has a half-acre building lot or whatever, putting 1 pole up.
Yeah,
I think that seems reasonable.
So
to
anything,
me.
I'm sorry,
Additional
Ron.
poles, you have to have an additional acre. though.
Otherwise, up to 1 acre, you can have 1 pole, and then after that, it's 1 per additional acre. So if you have 2 acres, you can have another pole.
Okay,
Or-
just let me try to understand. So if you have 1.1 acres,
1 pole.
1 pole,
One.
Okay.
You have to have another full acre.
No.
a full acre, okay.
1 per full acre, 1
Okay.
pole per full acre. After the first.
After the first one.
But the more I
So-
read this is almost just about the banner
That's really what it
and the
is.
banner standard as opposed to the pole.
Right, what I'm hearing you say is pole banner.
Mhm.
So, right.
Pole and banner,
And this still wouldn't limit the amount of light poles you can have, just the amount of banners.
I
you
mean,
can
if
put
it was
on
one
there.
acre.
That's probably coming under building codes.
See, I mean, you could have 2 acres with 6 light poles, but you only get two.
Two banners.
Banner signs.
Right.
Right.
Can we talk about the banners and the frames a little bit? I'm concerned a little bit about, maybe I'm not reading it right, but to me it means that there's a frame all the way around the banner. Is that what you
Should be just
intended?
Top and bottom.
Top and bottom.
Okay.
And I didn't understand, they didn't
Let's
see
see,
the
hey,
picture.
let's see. It says mounted or secured within a
Within.
durable frame. So
If that secures the banner.
within
along
a
the
durable
top
frame,
and
does
bottom.
that mean that the 4 sides of that banner
There's a
is
picture
within a
right there.
frame?
Picture,
Peterson's.
Sorry.
There's Peter, it's up and, it's on top and bottom only
Yeah,
there.
but
Right.
see, and to my mind, that's not secured within a frame, which is the way this is
Okay.
worded.
just secure.
Change frame with support.
Support, top and bottom, rigid
Okay.
support,
Okay.
top and bottom.
Rich,
I think
it's good.
it makes sense. I think whenever you say frame, you're talking
Yeah,
about
people
4
think
sides.
it's-
I
Okay.
agree with you.
And so I would say securely sorted, rigidly supported top and bottom.
Yeah, I bet that's 23, 24 feet to the top of that.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, and that's something else to think about is whenever we're looking at our pole definition and heights, that we don't exclude any typical light fixture heights. Some of these fixtures, for example, at the football stadium, I don't know about Walmart, but some places those lights can get pretty high. And,
But
and
again,
so-
I don't think you know, at some point, lights need to be high.
Mhm.
Signs above, I'm sure that there's studies done for advertising. Signs above a certain level are not gonna get looked at anyway. so
Mhm.
they're
But
gonna-
they also need to be high enough not to restrict
Yeah.
vision from traffic flow. So this is a good height on this one.
So we wouldn't be concerned with the pole height,
No.
No, just
minimum and maximum sign height
The
on a
banner
pole, or
height.
banner
Mhm.
height on a pole.
There you go, yeah.
what's a good height maximum for the top of the banner?
Looking at this one at
25
Peterson
feet.
is, I'm guessing probably about 25 feet.
Well, I think the question is it obstructive in its present, if it's in its position, will it be obstructive?
Right.
If it's not obstructive, then it's above the height that you need to, you don't have to need a minimum, it just cannot be obstructive.
No,
So-
just put a maximum.
Well, really, you don't, either way, because it's.
Minimum, really.
Well, I guess it could theoretically could be 1 foot by 12 feet.
Mm-hmm. You know, you could
So
put
need
a
minimum height.
You
not
say
a
could
one
put a-
word, vertical word.
10, you could put a 10-foot minimum to the bottom of the sign and a 30-foot maximum to the top of the sign.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
That seems, that should be cover, you know,
Would cover them.
most scenarios.
And so most of these would probably be mounted to an existing pole or light standard.
Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely.
I don't think anyone's gonna go to the expense of putting in a bunch of poles.
But like you say, somebody could take that literally and put a piece of rebar, 15 feet long in the ground. Maybe we could restrict it to an existing light standard.
Rustin, have you seen any, I mean, could someone do it out of PVC? I mean, is that, I'm trying to think if there are other synthetic materials out there other than metal that might be okay to use, or we definitely don't want, if we just want to say metal. A lot of light poles and flag poles are done out of fiberglass.
The city does have some fiberglass.
And so,
Most light poles, I'd say 99% of them are gonna be
Mhm.
aluminum.
mhm.
What they are.
Movement, is that acrylic, fiberglass? So is that the same word? Or are they different?
That's a, I think it's kind of a different word.
My suggestion would be to leave it at metal. I mean, there may be down the road, if some issues come up with this, there may be some re-looking at this thing and tweaking it a little bit, but I really think,
Start off this way.
make it a metal pole
They're talking about light standards only.
would be my recommendation.
I mean,
Standard only.
you could almost make it, like I said, an existing
Oh, yeah.
metal pole or an existing,
Okay.
or to the standards of the light standard or
You
something.
may, but there may be
So they can put a
people that have
pole
businesses
just
out there that
where
don't have
this-
light poles. Don't have lights in their parking lot.
Well, what if they have a flagpole? Could they put this on the bottom of the flagpole, is what you're talking about? If they have a flagpole in their business. Some of these car guys just have flagpoles. Could they put this banner on there, below the flag?
That's a
Be
violation.
kinda tacky, wouldn't it?
Of course.
That's
Never
a
stopped them before.
That's a federal law that I believe,
You can't
that you can't.
do signage
A
on a
flagpole
flagpole.
is dedicated to a flag.
That'd probably be a good, that's a good idea.
That's a question for them.
30th Amendment.
So we're really addressing more than just the banner itself. It's what it's mounted to.
Right. I mean, someone mentioned aesthetics, and that would certainly be a component of that.
Yeah, because I could see how somebody may have a business that right now, K-Pub does rent light fixtures that can be mounted to a utility pole. So this is something that the owner doesn't have. They have light on their parking lot, but they may want to put up a pole banner. They don't have good enough signage on their building and they can't meet the signing code, so they may go to the expense of putting up a pole with a banner on it. So I think that if we're going to allow that as an option, then we need to say no higher than 30 feet, banner no lower than 10 feet off the ground, and let that be a possibility. And somebody decides they want to fork out the cash to put up 5 poles with banners on them on their 5-acre piece of property, then they should be allowed to do that. At least that's what we're allowing them to do with this language. And personally, I think that would be okay.
Well, the content of what's on the banner, is that a different subject? You're only
Yes.
allowed to have so many signs per business, so you wouldn't really have 5 signs if it's a business name is on there,
It's not per business, it's per site.
per site. Okay, so if I have a business and I have 2 acres and I want to put up 2 poles, I can have 2 signs, I can have my name of my business on both signs. Yes or no?
Yes.
I thought you only have 1 sign.
No, this is kind of a separate
Yeah,
component.
we're separating the sign
Banner-
from the banners.
The banner is different than the sign.
Yeah.
The sign is a different thing.
So you could have the maximum signage on your building or in the yard of that business, plus you could put up these additional banners.
Yes. And you know, it's interesting, when y'all were talking, I wrote down, some cities do, you know, you get the full menu of signage, but then, you can't get a maximum more than some square footage or something, so, but we don't do that. This is, you know, part of this is the market controls, part of it is, you know, if you stick a banner on a flagpole, I bet you're gonna get a lot of complaints. Part of it is, they've done the studies, the more signs you have doesn't mean you're gonna get more people. People actually get a little burned out on it and kind of,
You eventually don't see it.
right, eventually you don't see it and you ascribe
I just
a
mentioned to
certain.
Bob, I forgot about his 9/11 sign. I haven't seen it in a while. It's still there.
It is still there, yeah.
His banner, excuse me.
Legal banner too.
Legal
Yeah.
banner,
Well,
yeah.
anything that's gonna, anything that would be somewhat of a nuisance, you would think. You know, 2-acre site with 2 pole signs on it's not gonna be a nuisance to the community. Now, if you're a Walmart or something and you decide you wanna put, a bunch of banners out there, I don't think they're gonna do that simply because they don't need to. But
But I think they should have the
Right, well,
right to,
absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you.
if they do.
I mean, you could, truthfully, you can have one per acre up to a maximum of 15.
You
No
could
matter
put
how
a-
many acres you have.
You could put a max in there.
That's what I'm saying. You could say, you can have one, up to 1 acre, you get one for each additional full acre, up to a maximum of 15 banners, which might not be a bad idea.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
So what we're saying is less than 1 acre, you get 1, at least 2 acres to get 2, and then 1 per each additional acre,
Full acre, yeah.
full acre.
Up to a maximum of 15.
Is that the consensus? I
How
mean,
many did the hospital have?
14.
14, okay.
That sounds reasonable.
Yes.
But I think we need to say how they need, what they need to be installed on, some kind of clarification.
What other than a light pole would we envision these on? I mean, because that's really what, we could
Well,
we just
somebody
limit it to
could-
light poles?
Just, again, somebody could just erect a pole strictly for that banner if they
Right.
didn't have any light poles or anything else to use.
Which is fine as long as it meets as long as it's a metal pole and meets,
But we don't have any dimensions or anything,
We could say,
no
a-
Yeah, but
diameter.
that's really
no
not the
material.
intent. That's a sign, you know what I mean? I mean, could we just limit it to light poles?
That's my thought, just existing light standards. Or new
Or,
light
yeah, if they add a
standards.
light, yeah.
Or new
Mhm.
light
Is that what-
standards.
To me, that
Because those
that
have to
helps.
be, those have to be set in concrete.
Right,
So
yeah.
are all
Certain engineering.
are all of Peterson's, I'm assuming, are on light
Your
poles?
engineer light poles.
Right.
And
Even this one here, you
insurance-
see the bottom of the light.
Business insurance requires that you have certain light levels in parking lots. And so, I mean, you can sometimes get it off of the structure, but most likely, if you have any sort of acre, 2 acre tract or whatever else, you must have pole lights to reach the furthest part of your parking lot at, 10 to 15 lumen out to that area. So the only thing you're gonna have in a parking lot is light standards, okay? And so if somebody wants to come and put up a pole, put up a banner like this, that to me becomes a sign which comes under the sign ordinance.
Yes.
And so
Okay.
I totally, junior varsity again, concur with the concept of, we're talking about banners on light standards or light poles, which have requirements of their own in terms of support and
Anchoring.
and whatever else, yeah.
So if you just limit them to light standards, you've got it covered.
Metal light poles.
Mhm.
And so, Mike, we've also said, what, a minimum 10 feet off the ground?
oh, the height of the sign.
Yeah.
Base of the sign?
The bottom of the sign,
Minimum.
minimum of 10 feet. Top of the sign, maximum of 30 feet. Now, along those lines, is there going to be any issues with the city's banner signs that they have on some of their historic light poles that are lower than that? But they're not on, some are on private property, some are in right-of-way. So,
Are they banners?
yes.
You're talking about over here.
Yeah, I'm talking about on Water
That's a
Street.
good
and-
point. They're probably not 10 feet.
Why don't you do, in the code, wouldn't it be 6'8" would be the code?
6'8" is it's a code requirement for
So you can't.
obstructions.
Shouldn't be below that anyways.
But
As long as it doesn't impede the vision.
Well, if it's 6'8's the code, then why don't you just put
In
it
where you
above that
walk.
number?
Yeah. That'd be where you walk, so I don't know if that applies.
Oh,
here.
I see, walk 6 foot.
Spurs.
No
Yeah,
shield, no shield.
whatever we do, we don't want to get the city into a bind on what they're already doing as well.
Right.
Um,
Well, Or maybe don't do a minimum, just say, so it's not a nuisance to,
Well, I think we need to keep it up off of the ground and out of the way of line of sight. Could say 7 feet.
I think that'd be okay.
7 feet's a good easy number
7
instead of
feet?
10, minimum of 7 feet to the bottom.
About the height of that door, a little higher.
Mhm.
That's much lower than the one we're looking
The
at.
idea is
Mhm.
if they're putting these banners up for advertising, they're gonna put them higher anyway.
Right, right.
Cause you're sitting in a car, you're driving here somewhere, you really can't see that banner at 7 feet out of your car, so they're gonna,
It's something, once you get out of your car, you see.
yeah.
Okay.
Did you get all that?
I think so. Sabina's ready to read it all back to you. One thing I would just say, and I'm not trying to belabor the point, because I think y'all have done good work and we're ready to move forward, but, so, one sign per 1 acre, but you get it, the first one, you get it less than an acre. But let me just make sure I'm clear. So if I come in with a quarter acre lot, or a 1/10 of an acre lot, do I get a sign?
You get one sign.
Okay.
If you got a light pole to put
If
it
I
on.
got, right, you gotta meet everything else, right, okay, that's fair.
And then you had better at least 2
You gotta like that.
full acres to get 2 signs.
Right, yes, sir.
And then at least an additional complete acre to get
Right,
each
right.
an
So
additional
I'll
sign.
capture all that and,
To a maximum of, we say 15?
okay.
Is the fine 2,000 per sign?
Arguably, it could be, yeah.
It's up to, do you guys?
Actually, I don't know, the sign code might be $500, I can't remember. Are you reading?
I'm reading on,
Oh, on the ordinance,
It
then
seems
it
pretty
probably is
hefty.
$2,000. Yeah, what I need to do, that's a good catch, because I need to make sure that the sign, sometimes we do a separate fine amount within the actual code, so I need to go make sure that
That
that's
seems,
consistent.
that just seems.
But it could be.
But
Now,
you said-
very rarely do we ever go and ask for $2,000 for anything.
yeah.
And you said the banners is mounted to a metal pole, or are we gonna say pole or light standard? Or do we need to?
metal light pole. I think.
Metal light pole, that's what I was gonna go with.
Yeah,
No.
That's what I heard.
no, that's better.
Mhm.
That narrows it down.
And the frame can be constructed of metal or similar material?
I think we need to get away from the word frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna,
Secured
Rigid
top and
support.
bottom with rigidly secured top and bottom.
Mhm.
I like that. Mike, anything else that we need to address? And that's really what you wanted, was just some, our thoughts.
that's what council wanted, yeah.
I'd just like to think through the 15 banner maximum just a little bit. How many acres is Shriner University?
It's probably in the 40s.
You know, if you had
40 plus.
I don't know what type of development it would be. If you wanted a series of banners along your road, say Avery's new manufacturing plant, got kind of a long driveway, 3 or 4 along there, and then however many they're allowed in per their acreage and their parking lot. I guess I'm trying to think of at what point would it be reasonable to have more than 15?
So you're thinking maybe change that number from 15 to say 25?
You know, I don't
Why
know.
would you want more than 15? I mean,
Well, I guess because it could theoretically not have all those 15 just in a parking lot. They could be along
On
a
road.
drive,
Shriner's a good example.
on
But
your
again,
way up.
if you've limited it to light poles,
Mhm. Right. And, you know, and Shriner has lots of roadway, lots of parking, lots of walkways with lights on them, not just on the road, not just in the parking, sidewalks as well. And so, you know, I could see how 15 would not be enough for Shriner.
To put slogans and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, they'd be out of compliance right now with that. Honestly, they have more than 15 now.
mhm.
Well, do we want to build a variant, do we want to build a policy or with it's going to cover every possible exception?
Yeah.
Versus an exception could be brought here and say, this is the reason why we want to go beyond 15. And you grant the variance then, as needed, because that way you have a chance to look at it before all of a sudden you've got 30 of them up.
Mm-hmm. I guess that, you know, that makes some sense. I don't know what.
I think we're looking generally what the practice or the policy will be,
Mm-hmm.
and say 15 seems to be a reasonable number.
Mhm.
Well, it's what it is at Peterson, which I think is very reasonable.
Mhm.
It's not intrusive at all.
And Shriner doesn't have really any public roads that run through it. They're all private once you're inside, right?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Which is a great point, because then some of those signs are not really signs. Because you remember, to be a sign, you gotta see it from a public right of way.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they probably could put up 100 of them if, you know, 80 of them are obscured kind of more of the internal part of the campus.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's just something to think about. But Drew mentioned the same thing that you were going, or one of you, Mr. Barnett was going through. So come back and seek a variance.
Okay.
Anything above 15.
That'll be all right.
Any other comments?
I think we'd like to see it brought back to us, I guess,
Before it goes to city
before it goes
council.
to city council.
Is that possible?
So they don't kick it back again.
I think,
Okay.
I think we have it scheduled for city council in January, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It's the first council meeting.
I mean, there's no rush on this thing, I don't think, is there?
Yes and no. I mean, you know, it went in one iteration to council already,
Yeah.
and there was kind of a split about whether they wanted to
But
move
there's
forward.
nothing pending.
No, I don't believe there's.
But
anything
what you
pending.
can do, I mean, just for comment purposes, what you could do is get it redrafted and send it out to us just to look at.
Oh,
just
we
to-
can absolutely do that.
And then send you our individual comments before it goes to city council. We don't have to have another meeting, correct?
Do it by email?
long
We
as
can do it by
we're-
email?
Email, is
Sure.
that correct?
Sure, I mean, individual, so, you know, don't reply all kind of deal.
Right.
So back to us in
Yeah,
plain.
'cause it's still
Okay,
that the
we can
Open
do that.
Meetings Act.
Sure.
It's called a walking quorum, I think.
Yeah,
Internet.
yeah, let's not do that. Let's not get involved in that.
We don't want to do that.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you all.
Okay, any other comments? If not, staff report.
I have nothing to add this evening.
Okay, if not, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor? 5-0.
Merry Christmas.
Lost one. Lost one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.